Good afternoon, guys. Morning, afternoon. It's almost noon here. Um, this is Professor Adi. It's nice to actually, well, I guess you're putting my face with my name. I don't get to see you guys. But I thought that I'd give you guys an example via video today for a couple of reasons. One of which, what I have to say, is actually easier to convey over video than it is actually typing all this out. And the other reason is that I'm presently working on my doctorate and I'm taking my quantitative data analysis class for my dissertation. And my professor does this for some of the complex statistical stuff that we have to do. We do read the modules online, and he gives us little videos at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week where he summarizes a lot of the things that we're working on. So I thought I'd try this for the first time, see how you like it, because my dissertation is also focusing on online classes and the validity of online classes versus what you get out of online classes versus what you would get in an actual in-house scenario. So I'm actually kind of interested in your feedback regarding that as well. But I want to go ahead and give you my example. This week you're looking at language in action, and in particular you're going to look at a couple of things, really. You're going to look at the speaking acronym that was developed by Dale Hymes in the 1960s. And this acronym is just a way of looking at how to understand language in a particular context. So how you do ethnographic field research when you're specifically looking at language. And this is very useful if you are looking at several different modes of language or several different languages, if you will, especially if you're not familiar with the language. Because as you discovered a couple of weeks ago or last week, with nonverbal communication, so much of communication is actually nonverbal. In some instances, scholars suggest up to 60%. So that's quite a bit. You all know that your face can say something that is vastly different from what's coming out of your mouth at the same time, and that in part is what's bringing us to today's, to my example. So that other aspect, aside from looking at the speaking, that acronym for looking at ethnography and language, is the work by Michael Agar, and that is looking at rich points and how to discern a rich point and how to repair a rich point. And that's the example that I wanted to give you guys. So I give this example in my lecture every single year, and I always preface it by saying that maybe one day this example will save your life. And it depends on how you look at it, it very well could. So let me give you the example. One of the last books that I read when I left graduate school, I went to grad school down at Cal State Northridge, which is in the San Fernando Valley, the Los Angeles area, was Michael Agar's book. And it is Understanding the Culture of Conversation, Language Shock, Understanding the Culture of Conversation. It was a very fascinating book that we had to read. And so that book was the last book I read, and so it was really fresh on my mind when I ran into this rich point. The rich point actually involved my wife, which at the time was the woman that I was dating. I've known my wife since I was a student. When I moved to California, I'm originally from Tennessee, and I had met my wife when I started my education over at Modesto Junior College. She was also a student. We were both work-study students in the computer lab. My wife is originally from Peru, and I was originally from Tennessee, so our accents kind of drew us to each other. And we remained friends when I went off to school. I did my undergraduate work at UC Santa Barbara and my graduate work at Northridge. And we remained friends. When I finished at Northridge, I came back up here to the Modesto area and was teaching at Modesto Junior College, where she was now working as a full-time employee in the science, technology, and engineering department, running one of the computer labs specifically for statistics. And I had mentioned to her that I was interested in dating her. We were still good friends. We still exchanged emails. We were going out to lunch together a lot. I mentioned that I was interested in dating her. And my wife has a son, and at that time her son was 14, I think. And I had mentioned to her, ask your son, ask Christian what he thinks about it, and come back to me and let's see if you're interested in going out. So she said she would. A couple of days later, she said Christian thought that was a great idea, so we started dating. And this was in June of that year. And within a few weeks, dates obviously were pretty regular. And one in particular is where this rich point comes into play. And it was one evening when I was picking my wife up, my girlfriend. That's difficult with those words. I was picking her up, and my wife was speaking to the little old lady that lives beneath her. My wife lived in an apartment complex at the time. And the little lady was named Maria, and Maria was Italian and spoke Italian. Now, my wife is from Peru, but ethnically she's Spanish, Italian, and Quechua. And her grandfather was Italian, so she knows enough Italian to carry on a small conversation. So she was having a conversation with Maria, and Maria asked her who I was because she saw me coming and going quite a bit. And my wife had referred to me as her boyfriend. And when I pulled up to the apartment complex, I saw her outside with Maria. And I said, hey, what were you and Maria talking about? Oh, and my wife replied, she goes, she's seen you come and go a lot, and she was asking who you were, and I said, you're my boyfriend. And I turned and I looked at her and I said, boyfriend? And that is when the whole date went south. She went into her little cocoon, typically what she did back then when she was uncomfortable or uneasy. And she kind of ignored me the whole night, though. Didn't have a lot of conversation. I truly do not remember where we went on that date. I just remember being angry. And so it was abysmal. We probably went out to eat, hell knows. So I do remember dropping her off. And at that time, I was driving a motorcycle. When we got engaged, that's the first thing she got rid of was the motorcycle. So when we were driving to the date, we drove her car. I drove her in her car. But we were still both frustrated. So I got in my motorcycle. I remember being angry and doing a few donuts and then leaving the apartment complex. I drove home. And the whole time I'm driving home, I'm trying to figure out what happened, what went wrong. And I couldn't put my finger on it. So I went through the whole conversation in my head and realized that it was at the point where I questioned the word boyfriend. So then I started thinking, and of course, this came into my head immediately. So it being the last book that I read in college and grad school really did help. So I thought, well, and I also was thinking as an anthropologist, maybe it sounds cliche considering that's my profession, but that's truly what I was thinking of. And I thought, well, what if there's something culturally going on? Because my wife's from Peru, things might be different. So maybe if I call her up and start asking some probing questions, maybe we can figure out what kind of went wrong. So I did that. And I called her up. She was a little aggravated. And I said, I can't. It was 10 o'clock at night, 10:30, something like that. And I said, I can't go to bed on this sour note because we've got to go to work tomorrow, or we have to work on Monday. It might have been a Friday night. So I convinced her that we needed to talk. So I drove back up to the Modesto area where she lived, into her apartment complex, and we started talking. So the very first thing I said, look, I said, describe to me the process by which people in Peru date. And she said, okay. So she went through the process. So in Peru, it's a fairly complex process that includes a formal courting ritual, courting time frame. So when someone is interested in someone, you start off by going out. And that generally is accompanied with a family member, a parent, maybe an older sibling, an older brother, an older sister, who monitors the two that are going out. And then after that, there's a formal courtship. And then after the formal courtship, that's when you have the period of boyfriend-girlfriend. Okay? So this going out is actually part of the boyfriend-girlfriend. So that's the first thing you need to understand. So when I asked my wife I wanted to go out, in her mind, that was automatically jumping to the boyfriend-girlfriend, and that's why it took her a couple of days. There was no formal courtship period. Okay? Now, I'm originally from Memphis, and in the South, while there is a courtship period, that courtship period is um, generally a part of the process of getting engaged. So you date, you go out with others, and you date for a while. And the dating and the going out is synonymous. So when I asked her that I wanted to go out, that's the mindset that I was in. I was using the terminology that I am familiar with, that I grew up with in Tennessee, and that's what I was doing. But the words and the way that she uses the words in Peru, that the culture came into play, that language in action came into play, and it was dramatically different. In asking her to go out, I was actually being a little forward, and I was skipping a whole process of courtship going directly into the boyfriend girlfriend. But for me, the going out is a prelude to being boyfriend girlfriend. So the rich point was when I said boyfriend and my facial expressions. Remember that 60% of communication is done nonverbally, and those facial expressions showed something vastly different, and she misinterpreted those facial expressions. Using Michael Agar's acronym MAR, which is to make the mistake, understand the mistake, and repair the mistake, identify the mistake, and or awareness. So mistake, awareness, and repair is that knowing that the mistake was made when I said boyfriend, becoming aware that she's from a different culture. She's an English as a second language student. My wife's an ESL student. So she still struggles. She's been in the United States for 23 years and, still has issues with English because she thinks in Spanish, but speaks English most of the time. And then repair, learning and knowing how to repair it. So once all of that was understood, that's when I stopped my wife and I said, okay, let me explain how we do it in the South. And I explained it to her just as we did. And then we both realized that it was just a vast misunderstanding. Me being surprised that she called me her boyfriend was not negative. It was pure surprise because, of course, being the boyfriend was the next phase I was trying to get to. But for me, I had to go through the dating and the going out part first before I could get to the boyfriend. And in my wife's culture, all of that was skipped and we went straight to the boyfriend girlfriend because the going out is part of what it means to be boyfriend girlfriend. Whereas in the United States, that's not uncommon for those two entities, relationship entities, to be separated. So it worked. It worked out because we got married. That happened in June, and we got married in October of the same. No, we got engaged in October of the same year. So understanding how to recognize those little rich points and knowing the importance of identifying, being aware, and repairing those rich points can be extremely important when you are dealing with people. It doesn't even have to be from another cultural area. Even English speakers, because we're always doing this because our mouth says one thing and our facial expressions say something completely different. And that's where that rich point came into play. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that it was helpful. And if you really do think these videos are helpful, maybe once a week, this might be something that I will consider doing probably in the spring. I can't do them right now, but in the spring, this will probably be something that I'll start to do if you guys think it's helpful. So I would appreciate your feedback. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. And guys, when you email me, check on that little frickin' box that says email to recipient's email address, because very few people do it, and I've been asking you guys to do it all frickin' year. It'd be very helpful because I'm not on my computer 24/7. And it goes to my phone, and if I see it on my phone, then I can generally respond within an hour or so. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. You guys have a good day. Please email me if you have any questions. Bye-bye.